Welcome to Greater Good Radio Hawaii, where leaders inspire leaders. Greater Good Radio Hawaii is dedicated to social entrepreneurship. I'm your host, Evan Leong, and with me is my co-host, Carrie Leong.
Today's guest is Marc Tilkeer, President and CEO of the Marathon Group of Companies, which includes BEI Hawaii and HT&T. Marc spent 10 years with C. Brewer Company Limited, most recently as Executive Vice President and Chief Financial Officer of Brewer Environmental Industries, LLC. Please welcome to Greater Good Radio, Marc Tilkeer. Welcome to our show, Marc.
Thank you very much.
So what is the Marathon Group and what do you do?
The Marathon Group is a holding company for BEI and HT&T. BEI is one of our core companies. We sell ag chemicals, fertilizer, and industrial chemicals. It also sells pesticides and has a bleach manufacturing. HT&T has a Peterbilt, Volvo, and GMC franchises for the state of Hawaii. That's medium and heavy-duty trucks. BEI is a distribution company. HT&T is a truck dealership.
BEI and HT&T are spin-offs from what C. Brewer used to be?
They were C. Brewer operating companies, and as C. Brewer was liquidating, I saw an opportunity, myself and my partners, to buy those companies. I was the chief financial officer of BEI for 10 years. Those guys were, trying to sell the company. So I saw an opportunity. And so I spent 4.5 years auditing all these companies. And one of the companies was BEI, which was Brewer Chemical Company. And I worked at BEI for about 10 years, and the guys who had done the leverage buyout in 1986 for C. Brewer they were getting older, and they had decided that they wanted some liquidity. So they had decided to sell their operations, and so I figured, that'd be interesting. So a lot of people were putting together groups to try to buy some of the C. Brewer operations. Some people were trying to buy Mauna Loa and different companies. A lot of the real estate, they had about 100,000 acres of land, or maybe less, some leased land. And of course, we couldn't buy all of BEI because they had a lot of different operations. They had operations in Guam, they had a construction business, they had a microbiological laboratory. So we put together as much money as we could. It wasn't really that much. So we had to go to the banks and borrow a lot of money. So we had a little bit of equity and a lot of debt. And then 9/11 came and a lot of the banks fell out. So when we were done, we only had a little bit of money. And so we bought a much different BEI, much smaller BEI. And so we couldn't take all the employees. We took about half the employees, too. And so we went and opened business January 2002 and called it BEI Hawaii, mostly because we didn't want to spend the money to change the logos.
Well, what about the trucking company?
That's true. And we had a lot of trucks and stationery and stuff. And we had to pay back debt as fast as we could. And so then what we did was we operated BEI, and then about 6 months later, we went back, and Brewer continued to sell their operations off, and we were doing pretty well, paying off debt, and the interest rates were favorable, and we were generating a lot of cash flow. So we went back and we bought HT&T, not for any particular reason except that it was co-located on our land in Iwilei, not because of any particular like business or anything like that. It wasn't, a chemical business or anything, but we reasoned at the time that we could buy HT&T and we can use the accounting department of BEI. We didn't need a separate accounting department or an IT department. We could use all the back office that we had at BEI. And so we could save a lot of money. And that's what we did. We just added on HT&T, which was located at the same place as ours. And so we did that. We went back to the banks, and we just piled on more debt. And that's really the way it started. And then in 2003, we formed the Marathon Group to hold these assets. And then we also had BES, which was an environmental consulting company, which was part of BEI, which we subsequently sold a couple of years later. And things continued to be, we were lucky, I guess.
Paid off
we were
all
able
your debt?
to pay off all our debt at HT&T a couple of years early, and the economy was good in Hawaii, and we did all right.
Thanks for tuning in. Stay tuned for more on Greater Good Radio.